I guess we're about ready to start. People take their seats. Put your seatbelts on. I'd first of all would like to very much welcome you all here. My name is Dana Ullman, and on behalf of the Bay Area Homeopathic Association, New College, and a lot of friends throughout the world even, from all the way east and west of Greece, I welcome you here. With that, I'd like to introduce Bill Gray. After he received his bachelor's degree at UCLA in bacteriology, he continued to receive his MD at Stanford Medical School. And for the past 6 or 7 years, he's been very, very intensely studying homeopathic medicine, particularly over the past year where he's been working with George Vithoulkas in Athens, Greece. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce Bill Gray.
Well, thanks everyone for the greeting. I only want to take a few minutes to do a few simple things so that we can get on to hearing from George right away, because I'm sure you're going to be very excited by what he has to say. First, I want to try to put homeopathy in a context so that what George has to say will be understood in the broad picture of what is going on nowadays in California and elsewhere in the United States. As I'm sure everybody in this audience is aware, there's a tremendous amount of reconsideration and reevaluation of the entire field of health and disease, not only allopathic medicine, but the whole concept of preventive medicine and the sense of responsibility, or the actual responsibility that people have for their own health. This has come about for a variety of reasons, which probably I'm not even qualified to fully analyze except from my own experience. And so I think I'll sort of trace a little bit the way the changes that have occurred in my life have come about, and I expect, I'm sure, that these are symbolic and representative of the changes that are going on in a lot of people's lives. I'm sure in this audience there's probably some number of doctors, some medical students, probably quite a few holistic practitioners, and certainly lots of people who in their own lives have encountered practitioners of various kinds and are wondering about a lot of issues. The allopathic profession, what we call allopathic, it's a word that means other suffering. And what we mean by that is standard orthodox medicine. As you'll see when George begins to discuss homeopathy specifically, allopathic medicine is the 180-degree opposite of homeopathic medicine. Allopathy, other suffering, refers to the concept that when there's a symptom generated by a specific organ or system in the body, the allopathic approach is to try to get rid of that symptom by whatever treatment, usually drugs, surgery, or whatever, as we all know. Beginning with the advent of the humanistic psychology movement, and I think a large influence came from Esalen and all of the spin-offs that came from the tremendously revolutionary concepts that came out of the Esalen movement, people began to re-look at allopathic medicine and realized that in the context of clustering people in diagnostic categories, studying people that have this common diagnostic category, and then trying to discover the cause that's leading to their disease in the hope that eventually there will be a possibility of intervening with that mechanism. Boy, that was quite a long sentence. That's what's been going on in allopathic medicine, but this is a fragmented view of human beings. It takes a look at the individual organ or the pathophysiological mechanism, but it's not really looking at the whole person. And many patients have become frustrated with this process And as well, many doctors have become frustrated with this process because it's not only dehumanizing to the patient, it's dehumanizing to the doctor as well. So from within and without the profession, there's been a reevaluation of what this whole process of curing disease is all about. Out of that came a rejuvenation of a lot of old techniques and the development of some new techniques that are now being clustered in the under the rubric of alternative therapies or holistic therapies. And this, as everybody here is aware of, encompasses a tremendously wide range of possibilities. Everything from nutrition of various types to exercise of various types, purely physical exercise, but also things like Tai Chi and Hatha Yoga and meditative exercises and visualization techniques, things like biofeedback, and then acupuncture, reflexology, kinesiology, chiropractics, osteopathy. I mean, we could go on and on and on. There's lots of different techniques. Basically, the underlying assumptions of these techniques, in contrast to the standard approach of allopathic medicine, is that the body is animated by processes which are integrated into a totality. The human being is one individual, complete whole on physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels. And as George will discuss, it's animated through an electromagnetic field. We're all encased in and are actually living as electromagnetic fields. And in the holistic techniques in general, the concept is to enhance the health-giving aspects of our organism by removing obstacles to its action, by nurturing the life-giving processes or forces, by balancing them if they're out of balance, by providing the proper nutrients, and through exercise and so on, increasing the circulatory ability of the organism. All of these, then, are enhancing the natural life-giving processes and elevating the level of health, and thereby reducing what we identify in our ordinary parlance as disease. This is a very important thing because it changes the relationship of the individual to his own health. It more and more puts people back in the driver's seat, so to speak, and does not make them dependent upon a professional with a mystified concept of what's going on, and you have to believe in me, so to speak, in order to get treated. So this is very important. The whole shift of emphasis is going back towards the patient. Now, even in this concept, there now is a reevaluation of these techniques, because we still see many cases, particularly in the realm of chronic disease, who, even with all of the best of holistic treatment, are not cured. They're not free of their disease. They're dependent upon, say, extremely limited diets or repeated treatments by a holistic practitioner or a variety of other limitations. And there's a reason for this. Chronic diseases, it's been observed in standard allopathic medicine, cluster in families. There tend to be families who have very few or no chronic diseases. That's relatively rare. And there are other families where there's a wide variety of chronic diseases. I'm not just talking about diabetics who inherit their diabetes from their ancestors, but we may see lots of different types of illnesses in the ancestry of a patient, and yet the patient is getting a different kind of chronic disease from the ancestors, but it's still a chronic disease. Chronic diseases can be inherited from generation to generation. If somebody is born, then, with a chronic disease tendency, how can the holistic techniques, which are nurturing and encouraging the life-giving processes, the vital force, be enough? I mean, at the time of birth, the vital force presumably is not imbalanced by improper diet or lack of exercise or whatever it is. And it's not just a matter of creating the right life, right habits in life that's going to prevent or cure chronic disease, there's other factors too that take into account heredity. So when we're faced with a population that has a rising rate of chronic diseases, and this rising rate of chronic diseases is not just because the population is getting older. If you look at the studies, it's easy to demonstrate that there is, even independent of the increasing age of our population, there are more and more chronic diseases at younger and younger ages. And this is a growing health concern that has everybody in the profession and the policymakers in government very, very concerned. So I think it's in this context, then, that people are looking to other ways of dealing, especially with chronic diseases, but also with all aspects of health. Homeopathy is a highly systematic, scientific, professional method of stimulating the vital force or the defense mechanism of the organism. So that even if there's an inherited weakness, homeopathy, when it's done correctly, is capable of strengthening this process and thereby getting rid of disease. And George is going to go into that in quite a bit of detail. So, on the one hand, homeopathy is a holistic technique because it deals with the whole organism as a whole, as an entire single entity, not fragmented. It's a therapy in the sense that it's dealing primarily with pathology and with disease, but it's different from holistic practices in general in the sense that it's powerfully stimulating the vital force, not just nurturing or balancing it. So that, I think, gives a very brief overview of how homeopathy fits into the holistic movement that's going on now and the trend towards alternative ways of dealing with health and disease. I'd like then, in that context, to try to paint a picture of the importance of George Vithoulkas in this process. In my own experience, is probably the best way to show his importance. After I finished medical school and had decided essentially to drop out of medicine because I wasn't sure whether I was doing more harm than good, I explored a variety of different techniques and finally came upon homeopathy. After studying it briefly, I went into practice as an MD, doing both homeopathy and nutrition and allopathic medicine. Gradually, as I learned, as I learned more and more homeopathy, the other aspects of my practice dropped away, and the kinds of cases I got became more and more difficult. After a few years, I finally had the opportunity to meet George Vithoulkas at a conference, and I had been quite frustrated with the fact that studying the old books, I read about cures that were far beyond anything that I was able to see in my own practice. And I was dealing with pretty severe asthmatics, rheumatoid arthritics, diabetics, people with a wide variety of allergies, not only the typical allergies, but the central nervous system allergies and stuff like that. And I was getting results that were certainly better than my allopathic practices, but I was not getting nearly the results that I could see in the books. And when I took some of my difficult cases to this conference and discussed them with George Vithoulkas, he was able, from his knowledge and his 20 years of experience, to penetrate right to the heart of the analysis of these cases. He was able to show exactly where I had misunderstood or had only a superficial understanding of what was going on. And when I took those cases back, I saw results based on what he was saying. So I was motivated to go and spend a month in Athens, Greece, where he lives, studying with him. And in that process, I discovered that there was a great deal that I didn't understand, and that here I was calling myself a homeopath and even teaching students of homeopathy, and yet I really knew virtually nothing about homeopathy in its true deep form. And I went back the next year for another month, and it finally became obvious that if I was ever going to become a real homeopath, not just, on the shingle, but actually in fact, I would have to go and study with him for a good period of time until I really learned it. And I've been studying very hard there since last July, and I'll continue to be studying there until at least this December. Homeopathy is a very deep thing. I mean, there's stages that homeopaths go through in their developments, their understanding. In the very beginning, it seems like it's fairly simple in concept. And when you come away this evening, I'm sure you'll be inspired by the concepts behind it, and it'll make you rethink your whole orientation towards health and disease. But also, you may come away with the idea that you know something. And after his lectures, there's a lecture series that Dana announced, there's even a greater chance that you may come away thinking that you know something. But if you ever have a chance to actually get involved with taking care of patients, and if you can contrast what you're doing with, or what you see other people doing, with what he's doing, you'll probably undergo the same process I did, and I was very quickly humbled. The most impressive thing that shows me that George's knowledge is far beyond what I had experienced elsewhere is not only his analysis and not only his ability to find the right homeopathic remedy, but it's the results that he gets. I mean, his practice is, as I say, the horror of horrors of internal medicine practice. I mean, this is the kind of thing that nobody would wish on their worst enemies, the kind of cases he sees. And the results that he gets are absolutely astounding. The vast, vast, vast majority of patients, when they come back for their follow-ups, are dramatically better, if not cured. And this is a very, very difficult chronic diseases. It's not to say that homeopathy is capable of curing anything or everything. It can cure virtually every known chronic disease, but each individual patient is not necessarily curable. So I don't want to overstate the case. But at the same time, it's getting very fantastic results compared to what else is available. And in order to get these results, however, it takes a great deal of very deep study and training under supervision of somebody that knows. And that's why I've been very, very privileged to work with George Vithoulkas. Another measure of the depth of his understanding is the impact that he has had virtually single-handedly in Greece. When he came to Greece a little over 10 years ago and quietly went about practicing and beginning to train some MDs in the area, he was just literally one man coming into Greece where there were no homeopaths. Now homeopathy is widely known throughout Greece. His introductory book on homeopathy, which has been published, well, had been published in several editions, I think 3 editions now in Greece. It was serialized in the Greek version of Newsweek magazine. I mean, it's not the version of Newsweek itself, but the analogous magazine. And his clinic now, he is training 22 doctors, and they're working full-time throughout the day. There's a whole staff of doctors that are constantly prescribing, and they are swamped with patients. It's a very exciting thing to see what can be done in just 10 years in a country like Greece. I mean, George now is known by, I'd say, a very large proportion of the population in Greece. What George means to homeopathy in its own history is important too. There was Samuel Hahnemann, who was the original founder and discoverer, shall we say, of homeopathy. And he is the one who pioneered all of the basic concepts. Then there was James Tyler Kent, who was an American homeopath who probably exceeded even Hahnemann in his actual prescribing ability. And he carried the concept of mastery of the field of homeopathy even farther. And I believe that George Vithoulkas is the next step in carrying the mastery of homeopathy even beyond Hahnemann and Kent. And I think the people who read the book that he has published, or the first volume anyway of the textbook, will see what I mean, and you'll get at least a glimpse of what I'm talking about when he comes up in a few minutes. So, I think I've said enough about the context within which George will be speaking.
It is a fact that I have given my life to homeopathy, and that in the last 20 years I can hardly remember a day that homeopathy did not occupy my best parts of my thoughts and did not, and I would forget it even for a few hours. It's also a fact that when I came into homeopathy, I had many questions, because the literature which existed. What's this noise? Thank you. I must hold it tight. Yeah, okay. Sorry for the interruption. So, what I was saying is that when I came in contact with homeopathy, I read the literature which existed, and I was trying to get hold of individuals or teaching facilities that existed in the world, and to have answers to many questions that were arising in my mind after all this study. Unfortunately, I could not find a place where, or an individual where I would get answers to my questions. And it is a peculiar fact that by this time, I think by 1960, I wrote to the University of California a letter asking them where they were teaching the subject of homeopathy in their university, and I would like to attend the classes. So they answered me that they were not teaching it anymore. They used to teach it, and they heard that such a subject was taught in Mexico, in the National School of Mexico. So, out of this desperation, I had to meditate and to probe into many questions that I had to give answers and to satisfy myself. In order to do that, I shall give you an estimate of the hours I had been working. I had been studying for at least the first 6 years, and that is about 10 hours a day, including the weekends. So, the knowledge which we call homeopathy, it's not an easy knowledge. It requires, of course, it may require less study if we had teachers, if we had institutions, if we had facilities. But it is a subject which requires the whole dedication, the whole being of the person that has decided to follow this profession. And it is a very great and a very sad fact that homeopathy at this time of history is taught nowhere in the West. It's taught in India and it's taught in Mexico in separate homeopathic medical colleges, but I have been there and I have been in India in different colleges, and unfortunately I can say that the standard of teaching is not high enough. So I have been asked to present to you today to give you an idea of what homeopathy is. That means I have to concentrate all this knowledge within an hour of talk. It is a task which is very, very difficult, and I hope you will excuse the many, many points that will be left outside of this short explanation. I would like to ask you, before I start, I would like to ask you how many of you know something about homeopathy, just to get an idea. Good. Okay. Well, in homeopathy, as you all know, we view the individual as a human being that is functioning on three levels: on a mental level, on an emotional level, and on a physical level. And that these levels are in this hierarchy. That means the mental level is more important than the emotional level and more important than the physical level. In other words, we can have this diagram with mental, emotional, and physical, which is the mental is the center. If that presents the human being, the mental part of the human being is the core, is the deepest part of the human being, then is the emotional, and then it is the physical. And all this human being is permeated by a force through which life manifests itself. So here we shall have this idea of permeation, and here, in order to understand this more graphically, we say that this is the vital force, which is connecting the three levels so a human being can function. Human being as a totality, every human being has a capacity for adaptation. That means when a human being finds itself in a very hot surrounding, in a very hot environment, immediately there are processes inside which are set in motion in order to bring about an equilibrium. There is perspiration, etc. When it finds itself on another environment which is cold, it's another process which is taking place. So, with every stimulation, whether it is internal or external stimulation, we have we witness the effort of the organism to balance itself. Now, every individual has a capacity, a limited capacity for balancing this situation, this stress. So, if we have a stress on a mental level, and this stress is can be handled by the organism, then we shall have some reactions and after a while we shall have equilibrium. In case that this stress is bigger than what the organism can handle, then we have the manifestation of symptoms, and these symptoms can be either on mental or emotional or on the physical level. I may give you an example that a man may lose his business. He had invested a lot of money in some kind of business. Then he gets the news that something went wrong and he is going to lose his business. He remains awake the whole night thinking about it. The stress, the mental stress under which he is so great that the next morning he may wake up with a skin eruption on his whole body. Or he may wake up with an even more serious condition like diabetes. That means that the stress was more than what the organism could handle. And therefore, we had an eruption. An eruption, it is on the physical level. But we may have, instead of the eruption, as a reaction, we may have a kind of anxiety, which is on the emotional level. As a reaction of the same shock, we may have a symptom on the mental level, which is haziness of mind. Since that shock, he cannot think anymore properly, he cannot think clearly. The same may happen if the shock is in emotional level. The effect of an emotional shock, like losing my child, my wife, my family, my father, my mother, that emotional shock cannot be handled by the organism, and it may produce symptoms on the physical, emotional, or mental level. So always we see that the center of gravity of a disease, could be located in one of these three levels of functioning of man. So, disease is nothing else but the symptoms which are produced after a stimulus, either an outside or an inside stimulus. And this is very important. These symptoms are exactly are the best thing that the organism can do in order to protect itself under the circumstances. This is an idea that must be understood very clearly and very deeply, and if it is understood, it may change our whole concept about disease and may bring about a revolution. Because in this case, we have to accept that every symptom is useful, is not something that should be thoughtlessly eliminated, but it is something that must be respected, because it is through this symptom complex that the organism can maintain a kind of equilibrium. A chronically diseased person is a person who has an equilibrium on a particular level. if there is a further shock on a chronically ill person, he may go into a deeper state of illness, and more deeper later, and more deeper. So there are stages on which we can be sick. The organism has a defense mechanism and try to protect our bodies by keeping the disturbance as much as it can on the periphery. Which means that the more healthy is an individual, the more peripheral will be the symptoms that he may develop under a stress. So if this idea is really understood and accepted, then the next thing that we may ask is how shall we bring back the lost health of an individual? Since we must respect the symptoms, we have let the people suffering. And really, that was the thought that prevailed in Hahnemann, the originator of homeopathy, who understood that it was better if he had left his patients with their symptoms than try to block or to eliminate some of them. That's why he said, I would rather abstain from practicing medicine because I see that I'm doing wrong to the people. But this idea of eliminating, of stopping symptoms, whether it is a headache, we take a painkiller, whether it is an arthritic pain in the knee, whether it is a skin eruption, whether it is a duodenal ulcer, whatever it is, we try to get rid of the symptom. This is the whole understanding of medicine, of orthodox medicine today. It appears to be scientific, and it says that if a person has constipation, for instance, we shall try to find out what is the cause of constipation. And after they made some examinations, they find that the liver is not functioning properly, and that is why the person has constipation. And says, okay, if I treat the liver, then the constipation will be better. Therefore, I'm treating the etiology. I'm treating the cause of the disease. And they're happy with this understanding. But why not ask further why the liver is not functioning properly? And some of them they may do. And they may find out that the liver is not functioning properly because the hypophysis is not producing the right kind of hormones. And then they may find medicine to affect the hypophysis and so make the liver function properly, so they get rid of the constipation. But then again the question comes, why the hypophysis is not working properly? I mean, where is the science and where it stops that? where we can say that it is the limit. So that is where allopathic medicine has gone wrong and has been asking for years and years the wrong questions. And there came Hahnemann, who said that beyond that physical body, there is another body, which is prior to the physical, and which really commands the functions of the physical body, and this he called the vital force. There was a great debate all along the years about the vital force, and eventually the scientists decided that the vital force was nothing, and all these vitalistic ideas were of the past, and we should forget about them. And it was Einstein and Max Planck and all these people that worked into the field of quantum mechanics, that they brought back this idea, and they brought forward the idea that everything has a field. Einstein actually has written exactly that we cannot talk about the matter and the field, because, he says, the field is the only reality. The field, the electromagnetic field, is the reality for Einstein only. It is not the physical body. Yet all along we have been trying to treat the physical body, ignoring the field, ignoring that which permeates the body. So, when people examined the atom and the subatomic structure of the atom, they discovered actually that energy and matter are interrelated. And there comes again Einstein, who says that matter is actually a region of space in which the field is more intense. But Hahnemann was saying that all along. And therefore, today Hahnemann becomes a great pioneer. Because what he said is that every symptom is the result of a disequilibrium, of an imbalance on the vital force. That is why before a person falls really sick with a disease that can be pinned down by the laboratory examinations, we have a period in this individual, a long period where he doesn't feel well. He says, I don't feel well, I don't know what's the matter with me, my energy is going down, I don't have the capacity to work which I had. I had some little pains here and there, but nothing can be pinned down. And then after a period of 1 year or 2 years, then we have the manifestation of a serious chronic condition. If we could have corrected this man's disequilibrium from the very beginning, he would never have had run into these troubles which he is now. So, the whole idea for Hahnemann was what to do to create, to regenerate, to bring back the lost equilibrium of the vital force. And his logic was as follows. Since after a stimulation, we have the reaction of the vital force, which we call it the defense mechanism of the body. We have the manifestation of symptoms on 3 levels, on those 3 levels. Then, if we could find a means to stimulate this field, this vital force, then we may be able to bring about order again into the individual. In this process, he decided to take himself certain drugs. And he found out that the drugs that he took and his colleagues took imitated the different diseases that had been existed so far and he had seen so far. So, after he had written down every symptom of the drug that he had tested on himself and on his colleagues, he applied these medicines to patients that they were coming to him to be treated for different elements. And he gave the medicine in a dilution of this order. And then he witnessed a great aggravation of the symptoms, because he was given a medicine, he was given a chemical, which he knew from his own experience that it produces exactly the symptoms that the patient had. So therefore, once he gave it to the patient had a tremendous aggravation. Therefore, he reduced the dose to 10 times. When he gave that reduced dose, aggravation, but still there was quite a strong aggravation. Okay, well, but this is just the ideas. Eventually, he reduced the medicine to such an extent that there was no effect anymore on the patient, because the chemical that was in the dilution was very little, so there was no effect at all. Here is what Hahnemann is credited with a really genius discovery. he thought that instead of simply diluting the medicine, he could pass the medicine through a series of succussions. By this process, he managed to produce medicines that contained energy, that were energized medicines. And this energy could reach this field of the human body. It appeared that the succussions, that means the striking that he was giving to every dilution he was making, it was giving energy, it was transmitting energy to the medicine, and an energy which was peculiar to the medicine which were diluted in it. He diluted the medicine to the order of 1/100 to the 12 potency, which is 24 zeros here. He was doing it by every time succussing the dilution of 1 to 100. He was given about 100 succussions for its dilution. That means a potency of that order would have 12 by 100 succussions. So in this way, Hahnemann was able to reach the electromagnetic field of the body and really bring about balance.